Hello and welcome to the Usability UX podcast, helping you to create better designs and better experiences every single week. I'm Dr. Chris Parker and it's great to be back after a brief interruption. I've had a bit of a dark period. You might have heard from the last podcast, I've been pretty ill, and then just as I started recovering from being bedridden, I flew off to China and did a whole load of my work for research and teaching. So glad to be back and glad to carry on the idea about psychology and design. Now, in the previous podcast, I talked about designers, we don't really understand psychology anywhere as near as we need to. And then I talked about dark UX very briefly. I want to return to the idea of psychology in practice, learning about it, improving ourselves. And I want to return to the idea of dark UX in a few weeks' time. But let's start to think about what can we practically use in psychology to make better designs. Now, the two most obvious ones with making interfaces that are easy to use, designs that really make lives better, are the visual structure. So visually, how do we optimize our page layout? How do we put items in certain areas? And the second part is how do we present text? Now, psychology has a lot of deep theories, great content, and just to say visual hierarchy and text is it, really does disservice the whole field. I mean, after all, Don Norman, one of the fathers of the field of user-centered design, he started out as a psychologist. And my dean at Loughborough University, Case de Mont, a really famous guy, he started out in psychology as well. So there's a lot we can learn on, and I want to return to this in a few weeks' time. But let's start with the basics. Let's get things down that we can use straight away. Now, the thing about visual structure is that people scan pages. Now, when we view a web page, when we view an app, when we see anything with a visual interface, it could be augmented reality or virtual reality, we quickly look around, try to understand what's going on, and go, right, I've now built a mental model in my mind of what's going on, now I can use it. Now, because of that, if your structure, if the way you've laid your content out is not easy to immediately understand, if I can't build a simple model from this to know, these are titles, these are text, as probably, this section probably has the answer to my question, then we're going to have to really work hard to find a way to get to grips with this system. And because we're working hard, we're going to make errors, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to have low satisfaction, very low performance, and hey, terrible usability. Bad usability is a thing you must avoid. So just having space between areas. Now, if we have numbers laid out in a similar way, if we have headings in a similar way, in a way that we expect to go through, so nothing catches us by surprise, we're in a really strong place. So we can break this down into three things to consider, which is, how do we work with long numbers? How do we have specific page controls? And how do we have the hierarchy in the page? If you get these three elements sorted, then you can probably have quite a good interface. So before we get started on this, I want to make you aware that if you're trying to solve a problem on your webpage, you've got bad satisfaction, or people can't find some information, or there's something wrong on this page, just writing down what that is on a piece of paper, or write down everything that's wrong with that page on a piece of paper, or a few post-it notes. Look at the webpage, look at the app, look at whatever you're doing. Go through these three items, numbers, controls, and hierarchies, and go, right, can I solve this problem with one of these three items? And a lot of the time, you will be able to. So, bear this in mind as we go through that these are practical things that, you should consider them one at a time, saying, how can I use this to solve my problem? So let's start with long numbers. Now, there's that really famous page, by Miller from 1956. The paper was the magic number 7, plus or minus 2. And that's, according to him in psychology, we can bear in mind 7 things at once. Maybe when we're stressed, 5, when we went very easy, 9. But, that's rubbish. It really is rubbish, because that's when you're trying to remember stuff. Quite often you don't really care. You're not paying attention. So you can break it down to 3, maximum 4. Why is that important? It's important because so often websites just ask us to enter long strings of numbers. So a really famous one on Amazon, when you're entering a new debit card, it says card number, please enter this in. This is like a 16-digit number, and you just have to type it all in. And what happens if you make a mistake? You've entered the number in wrong. The website says, nope, don't recognize the card number, go and check it. You're trying to count along the way and trying to say, well, whereabouts is this? Looking at your card, you might make another mistake, might have another mismatch because it's hard to read. If you break down the long number into chunks of 3 or 4, then it's very easy to go, yep, checking chunk 1, that's good, okay, move on to the next chunk. And if the card is also in chunked, which frankly bank cards already are, you can say, yep, this section's fine, next section's fine. Section number 3 has got a problem, and there we are. We see this done very well on websites like Next. Now, if you go to next.co.uk, the fashion retailer, every single product has a code. So you can phone them up and say, hey, I want this product. That code's broken down in chunks of 3. Quite often when we have software licenses, they're broken down into chunks of 3 or 4. So if people are making mistakes with any kind of number, have a look at it. Is there a long string of numbers, or are they broken into small pieces? Always break long numbers down to small pieces. And that's one of the first things you got. Second is the thing about controls. Now, controls can be anything that you are entering in. Now, quite often when we are entering text into text fields, this is a great source of errors or confusion. Just constrain what people can enter. Dates are a good example of this, because we can enter a date in a number of ways. So we can have day, month, year, month, day, year, day, month. We can write shorthand, so Sep, or we can add long, which is September. There's a whole load of different ways of doing this. So just saying enter a date, it's inviting errors. Or if you say, no, I need to click on this calendar and say, here's the date. Or it's a drop down for values, select these values. When you constrain people, when you give them, rather than just free text, you say, right, you must play with these controls within this very limited range of data input, that removes the ability to have errors. So that's a really good way. And the final thing is hierarchy. So people, as I said at the start, they scan pages and they are looking for information. If information is easy to get, that's fantastic, and we like that. If it's very hard to get, then we call it sticky, because the information is glued to the page. You must work really hard to get it out. So what you got to do is try and reduce the stickiness of information and make it easy for people to get at without thinking. You do this in a few ways. You break information into sections. You label each section, and then you present sections and subsections in a logical order. If people are looking at your webpage and they can't find information, they are looking in the wrong place, they're getting lost, or any of that stuff, then your information is probably too sticky, and you need to think about hierarchy, which is where we started off, because it's so important. Now, I see so many web pages out there, and so many blogs even, that you've got a big chunk of writing, a big long paragraph. And yeah, all the answers are there. And you might think, well, because you've told someone about it, and because the information is there, then the user must be able to find it, which is really far from the truth, because users will spend the time reading the whole paragraph and will absorb all the information only when they really care about it. How often is that? Not very many times. So you've got to go, right, what does the user care about? What is the order of things they care about? Why do they care about this? And go, right, let's take those things they really care about and break them into the headers. So they can go, yep, here's a page, that's a header, I see it, and go in there, reading, done. So you're making life easy. Now, just adding subheaders isn't always enough. Maybe you want to break it into bullet points. Now, I'd say a rough rule of thumb, if your paragraph is in standard view about 5 lines long, that's maximum. Your sentences should be about 20 words long maximum. Now, really nice short pieces so that we can just chunk. Just like with our minds taking long numbers into small pieces, our minds need short pieces of text to make sense of them. Then we process them, then we can look for them, and we can decide what to remember and what to ignore. So work out what people care about, work out the order they care about them, and make that structure. Now, you might not be able to do it in one go. Maybe you're going to have to build a prototype, give it to a user, see if they can use it well. If they can, wonderful. If they can't, okay, what did we learn from the previous one? Let's adjust the design, give it to someone else, see if it works now. You can iterate along. If you want a great example of something that just does not work, there's a website called lingscars.com. You look at it, and if you try to remember what websites were like in the 90s from Japan, it's like crazy animations, crazy information, crazy everything just being thrown at you. Your mind, you don't know where to look. Even talking about it, I'm confused. I'm looking at a picture right now, and it's like, how the hell do I describe this? So I really want all of you to go and look at lingscars.co.uk. It's an absolutely incredible website, but so useless because you just can't focus on any one thing. Nothing makes sense. Now, Lings Cars is a car leasing company. So if you want to rent a car, apparently it's where you go. Look at any other car leasing website, and you'll see that the sections are clear. Or at least almost any of them. Sections are clear. You know what each piece does. You know where to go for something. If I said, okay, find out where to search for model, find a manufacturer, search body type, you can just do it. And that is a really great thing. So I really want to encourage you, go and look at Lings Cars, go and look at anyone else, and then this thing about structure will make so much sense. So recapping on this, if you've got a problem with your web page, think about, are the numbers being presented in a way people can take them in and record them, remember them, or enter them correctly? Are any kind of controls being restricted, or are they open? If people are making errors with them, you want to restrict them. And if people can't find information, have you got titles, subheadings? Is everything in the logical order they're likely to come and find the information on? If that is not giving you the answers, if you've still got usability problems, then where do you go from that? Now, obviously, Think Aloud is a fantastic tool because you get the feedback from people saying, yeah, this is the problem I've got. I'm looking for this and I can't find it. So, yeah, follow that. There's another set of tricks that we can pull out of the bag which work with how the mind works. Because just as our mind is searching for hierarchy, we're searching for order that we recognize. And lots of times we're looking for text. We're looking for text that we recognize, looking for text that works with how we are thinking. Now, lots of us will assume that literacy and the ability to read is a natural, strong skill. And it really isn't. It is something that you learn. It's something that develops. Now, when you look at your own language that you're native, it can feel really comfortable and really good. When you look at a similar language, so if you're English and then you look at French or German, you can go, okay, this kind of feels okay, particularly German, being so close to the English language. When you look at something like Chinese with the Mandarin script, it makes no sense because it uses a completely different logic, which is the character is a picture, and the picture is just a clue saying, hey, this thing means person, means ren. Now, there's nothing you can read. There's no phonics in there to give you a clue. You just have to know. But if you're Chinese and you are looking at European languages have no sense. There's no logic built into here. So we've got to be very careful with how we think about reading, how we think about presenting words, because these are very effective ways to get people to move through your app, move through your service, move through your system. And you can't just take it for granted. So what can we do? What can we do to make these work really, really well? Well, there's 7 key rules for designing better typeface in your website, so that if those first 3 things I'm talking about aren't working, try looking at these, like thinking, can I make my text better? And maybe that can solve the usability problems I've got written down on the piece of paper right by me. These are using uncommon words, using difficult typefaces, using tiny fonts, having text on noisy backgrounds, repeating yourself just over the top, being really repetitive, having text in a very weird, centralized way, and then having too much items. Let's go through that individually. So quite often people want to show off how great they are. Like, look at me, look how great my language is. I'm going to use words like heretofore and obfuscate and aforementioned. Like, that's called hyperbole. And yeah, there is a place for it in the world, but when you're trying to make a design that works really well with your wide range of users, unless your wide range of users also speak in hyperbole at a regular basis, you're just going to confuse them. You're going to send them all over the place. Now, the problem is that we don't know what our hyperbole is, because for us, it's normal. And we're around people like us all the time. So anything that my friends are saying, that my colleagues are saying, that I'm saying, that's normal. Surely everyone gets this. But that's not true. You know, you look at newspapers, the Sun newspaper in the UK, I believe the reading age of 7-year-olds is a really, really low reading age. And that's because you've got a very wide readership. You don't get that many university professors reading the Sun. So you gotta squash the level of language down if you really want to meet the widest range. And by doing that, I think easy to read language is not a problem. No one's going to be put off by using far too simple words. If in doubt, write simpler. If people are confused by commands on a web page, if people are confused by what buttons mean, if people don't understand what to do, look at your text and say, can I make this simpler? Can I convey the same meaning in fewer words? If you can, do it. The second area is the typeface. Now, how you type your words makes a big difference. Some people believe that using all caps, caps locks, makes things easier to read. It really doesn't. Actually, it confuses us. Our mind can't really deal with it because we're not used to it. What works really well is capitalizing the first letter, because this is signaling to our mind that this is the start of a word and it's a letter that we recognize. The processing of language gets sort of sped up. So that works great for titles, but if we have too much of that, it overburdens our brains. So go for lowercase for long sentences, but capitalizing the first letter of each word for short phrases, i.e. headers. Now, you put the first word of paragraph in the place where the person's looking. So that could be the header, maybe. Could be, it could be the start of the paragraph. So that as soon as the mind goes over the page, we go, yep, I know where to look. This is really, really good. You've also got to make sure that the typeface you're writing in is in a really user-friendly way. Now, what is that? If you present text in Garamond, 66% of people will read that at a very fast rate compared to 31% of Times New Roman readers. If you pull up your browser or even Word document and say, right, let's have a look at Garamond, have a look at Times New Roman, you might feel they're very similar for typeface and go, well, this is just personal preference. Like, no, people read faster in Garamond than they do Times New Roman. But that's not only true on printed paper. If you go on screen, it flips around. So you actually need to have it as Helvetica or Arial on a screen to get fast reading. Now, the impact of this is that you get websites that are using crazy fonts like Open Dyslexic or Verdana or Comic Sans, Type Me Hands, any of these other typefaces. If your website's using crazy fonts all over the place as headers to denote structure, to denote what sections mean as subheadings, then instead of being exciting and being, oh wow, this is really great, it's making the information hard to see. It's breaking up the hierarchy. Our text is actually working against us, making the website unusable. So, can look at your headers, look at what typeface they're written in. If they're on a screen and they're not working, put them in Arial and see if users suddenly find this much easier to work with. On that notion of typeface, think about the size of fonts. If it's too small to read, it's too small to read. So if people aren't finding instructions, if they're searching for things that are not there. Look at the size of the fonts, look at the typefaces, because you can only work and read if it's readable. Another thing about that is your typeface might be a large size, but if there's lots of images going on all around it, if there's images behind it particularly, that's called text over noise, and it makes reading very tiring. Our ability to read and ability to carry on reading is reduced. The reason is that our gaze and eyes are being stolen away to the side all the time. We're doing extra work. Our subconscious is trying to process a lot just to get through this unnatural language barrier. And we stop. We don't focus. We forget what we're doing. We forget information we just learnt. Get confused, we fail. The website becomes unusable. So have a look at your website going, well, is there anything around which could be distracting my user, causing them not to be able to take this information and causing a usability problem? Now, maybe there's not anything distracting, but maybe there's too much writing. Now, if you've got too much writing, that is also noise. It's also just stealing you away. It's grabbing your attention. It's making you go crazy. So go, well, can I reduce the amount of just text? Can I reduce the things that could be taking people away? Fifth one is, are you repeating yourself too much? If you're saying the same thing over and over again, a starter sentences or a drop-down menu or anything, then people get confused over, where am I looking for this? But remember that mental map you do when you look at your website, look at your app page, whatever you're doing, you scan over the system, build a mental model of where things are. If you're repeating yourself using the same words all over the place, use the same phrases over and over again, then the mental model gets sort of like shortcutted and crossed. You might end up looking in the wrong place constantly, and that can cause an error, cause confusion, and cause you to go somewhere else. So just look at your page going, well, what could be cause people to think that the answer is somewhere else than it actually is? Are there two bits where, a mental model is being crossed? Back on the idea of mental models, is your text left justified, center aligned, or right justified? The reason is that whenever we read text, we always go to the start on the left-hand side. If your text is left justified, your eye knows where to travel. It's a very effective, very efficient route, and you can relax and just take the information in. If your text is center justified, your eye has to work a lot to find that start of the line, cause you to be confused, and again, that ability to take information in, increase your mental model, know where to come back to, is really, really reduced. It slows you down and causes serious errors. Now, I've been talking lots about text, all these rules about what to do with typefaces and various pieces. If in doubt, if you're not sure what to do with your text, if you think, okay, my visual hierarchy is good, my subheadings are good, my order is good, all that stuff, my typeface is good. The amount of text I think is good, but there's still errors. If you don't know where to go, there's one rule left, which is minimize it. No, you want people to have less to look at, less to read. If you can show people with a picture, that's a more efficient way of presenting information than writing. Writing is not as good. So you want to reduce the need to read as much as you possibly can. So after now it's covered the visual items and covered the textual items of web page. Now this obviously hasn't been bringing out deep psychological theories. We're not going into the I and the id and that kind of really useful stuff. But all of this is grounded in the fundamental ways of how our minds work. By going through these two sets of design principles, you should be able to address a lot of your design problems that you started by writing down on a piece of paper. If you can't, then there's a lot more things coming, and we're going to be talking more about that in the next few weeks to really improve. But this should be a great starting point. You can improve the hierarchy, you can improve the text, reduce the errors, and by doing this, increase user experience. So if you found today's podcast interesting, please subscribe. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, please leave a review. It really helps the channel to grow. You can find me on Twitter at UseGenDesign and on YouTube at Design eLearn Tutorials. Next week, we're going to be taking the idea of psychology further with returning to the idea of dark UX and how we can really persuade people into doing things that we wouldn't normally do. And after that, we're going to be going in the future about the business case. How can you convince people that what your work is valid? I've been Dr. Chris Parker. This has been UX Usability Podcast. Thank you.